Here we are with Carole Hagin, known to some as Carole, and
or grandma,
or grandma,
or mom,
or you know, I've had a few choice words for her over the years, but we're not going to go into that right now. Carole, can you tell us a story about I don't know, high school?
Well, I ended up in high school in Lafayette at Acalanes. Started when I was 12 years old, which was way too young, and I was shocked that there were men there, because they were seniors and they were 18. Scared me to death. I had just decided to sell my horse because I noticed that boys were more interesting, and so I did that, and I went ahead and enjoyed high school somewhat. I felt a little weird because I was too young. And after high school, I graduated and went to Diablo Valley College because my mother wouldn't let me go away to Oregon State.
So if you went to high school at 12, when did you graduate? How old were you?
16.
16. You had your license?
No, I didn't learn to drive till I was 22 or 3, something like that. I took driver's training, but it was illegal for me to really drive because I couldn't take it at a time when you could get your learner's permit, because that was the way the classes worked out. So I really didn't learn to drive in high school, although the driver's training teacher did try me out once and said he probably didn't think I should ever drive. And so I was a little afraid to drive after that. And I went to Diablo Valley College, where I did pom-pomming and lots of art, and then I decided that I'd also minor in science. Had a couple of boyfriends, one I was really in love with.
What was his name?
His name was Woody. He was a jazz pianist and a track runner, and I thought we would get married, and indeed we almost did a couple times, but he was very ambitious and decided he wanted to become a jet pilot and figured getting married wouldn't work. So he said, when you're older, when you're about 35, I'll get married with you. Well, he did get married when he was 35, by the way. So I was heartbroken and went off with another fellow named Neil and got married in my junior year.
Junior year of college, of DVC.
Well, no, I went to San Jose State after DVC for a while. And then I went back to DVC because I was in love with Neil. And I got married then. And so then I started this little family. Had Lori and Terry. But it didn't work out with Neil and I because he didn't realize that being married was a serious thing. And once you have kids, you start realizing it is a serious thing. I didn't know that before.
Yeah, I haven't quite got that yet, but okay.
Yeah, and then the thing is, I had a mother who was married 5 times, and so I didn't have too much of a learning thing going there. I also had a grandmother and an aunt who ran the whole family. There were 7 kids, 5 girls and 2 boys, and most of the women worked and a lot of the men died. So it was sort of a matriarchal family. So I was pretty good at running my little family of just the 2 kids and myself when I went to a car club meeting with my brother, who was the president. It was called the Highland Touring Club, and we went on these tours. They were really fun. And I met Bob Hagin. I took one look at him and thought, ooh, I like him.
And so what did you like about him?
He was very attractive and good looking. He was quiet and nice and polite. And then when I talked to him, it was really easy to talk to him. Got the spark, you know. So anyway, apparently he looked at me and felt the same thing, and he asked my brother about me because he had known that I was pregnant with Terry, and he knew that I had 2 kids, so he didn't understand what my status was. And once he found out, he got kind of into a spot where he could meet with me. He was very shy, and we met each other, and it was all over from that time. But while I was doing that, I was also dating Woody again after the divorce, and so you're going to have to edit a lot of this.
Oh, no editing.
Okay. Anyway, I was dating him again, and I was also dating a fellow named Charlie and another guy named Gail.
Now, wait a minute. Are any of these guys one of the guys with the gull wing that Lori threw up in the...
Yeah. Charlie was the guy that owned a 300 SL Mercedes with a gull wing, and whenever we went anywhere, he made me drive because he thought I was a better driver than him. And Laura threw up in his side pocket. But the problem was you couldn't open the door because the vomit was in the side pocket. It was really exciting. But I didn't really like him, but one of the reasons I was dating him is he was going to the same car club as my brother. In fact, he went to high school with my brother. And so as soon as Hagin actually showed interest in me, I said goodbye to Gail, goodbye to Woody, and goodbye to Charlie. And Hagin was the one, and we decided to get married almost immediately, but we couldn't because my divorce wasn't final, because in those days it took a long time to get a divorce. So it was about 6 months after we started dating that the divorce was final, and a week later we went and got married. And we
Where'd you get married? Did you get married in like a church, or?
Yeah, we went to San Mateo. We didn't tell the parents because his brother and sister wanted Hagin to stay home and take care of his mother, who was divorced. And so he decided we needed to get married quietly. So we got our license and went to San Mateo and got a minister to marry us with a couple of good friends as our witnesses. And then we decided that we would start a family when and have the baby when we'd been married 1 year, so that it would be close enough to Terry. And when I married him, Terry was about, let me think, Lori was 4, so he was about 18 or 19 months old. So he was pretty young. And so they never knew anybody but him as their dad, and then he arranged to adopt them. My brother was an attorney, so he took care of that. So we got pregnant to have the baby a year after our anniversary, and I had a miscarriage. Right after that, Hagin got mumps and had this huge problem with his testicles. They got really big. And Kaiser said, "You may be sterile." Guess what?
Yeah.
He wasn't. So we had promptly 5 kids, about 18 months apart. And Terry was 2.5 when the first one was born. And it went on and on and on, and so here we are.
Wow.
So after we didn't have a whole lot of money because Hagin had our car business called Impossible Motors. It was really well named because the city of Oakland asked him if he had a junkyard license, but it was used cars that he was selling. So anyway, he wasn't making much money. I wasn't working. I was always pregnant. So I decided when the children were about, well, Brendan was about 2. He's my youngest, who is now 43, I believe. I went back to DBC again and got my pre-nursing and went to nursing school. And then in the meantime, I started delivering babies at home because I met a bunch of hippie midwives and I was pretty good at having babies. And I'd been teaching childbirth education. So I was going to school full-time. Our house got condemned because of the electrical and the plumbing.
That's when I met you guys.
Yeah, and I met Rick then, and thank God you showed up a couple times because I was just a mess trying to live in this old battered house, and for a while we lived in a motel. And anyway, I got through midwife school, which was not easy while the house was being rebuilt, and then started work at Rockridge Healthcare Plan as a nurse midwife, and also San Antonio Health Club, which it wasn't a club, it was a clinic. And that was all.
Did you say San Antonio?
Yeah, it was called San Antonio Healthcare.
In Oakland?
Uh-huh. You know
Okay.
that one? Yeah. And it was all a socialist clinic. It was all different types of people, and everything was done so that everything was equal. There's a friend of mine named Joe Selby was a doctor whose baby I ultimately was his midwife for. So we, let's see, after San Antonio and that other place, Rockridge, I decided I needed to be closer to home, so I opened a private business in Lafayette. Meantime, Hagin had gone back to school and gotten his teacher's credential, and he was teaching at these, while I was going to midwife school, he was teaching at the local high school. So we were a little more solvent. We were able to hang on to our house, which was touch and go before that. And about houses, we had rented, and we finally were able to buy a house from Fran Brown and her husband. And I'd gone to high school with Fran Brown and her husband, Jim. And they needed to buy a bigger house because they had 5 kids, and I at that point had 7, so I bought their house. And she helped me buy it because it was really tricky. we paid the tuition to an alternative high school for her boys in return for the second mortgage that they held. It was pretty crazy. Anyway, we had that house, and then it just seemed like there was no room, and so we ended up buying this other house in Martinez that the kids were mad at me, but it was bigger, and it actually had 2 bathrooms.
Is this Blum Road?
Blum Road, yeah. And we were there for 32 years. And Blum Road was, I think it was 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on a third of an acre. But the kids were all kind of mad because they had to go farther to go to high school, grammar school. But anyway, it was a good little house for us, and my son Matthew eventually bought it when I moved up to Portland. So life continued, and I worked as a midwife and was gone a lot and up all night, and eventually went to work at Kaiser in 1990 after running a home birth practice, a hospital birth practice, and in 2 or 3 different places with some partners. During the time I was doing the home birth practices, we had some really fun births in teepees and climbing trees and on houseboats. One of our clients was Baba Ram Dass's guru, whose name is Bhagwan Das. Taj Mahal, a few other little fun people.
I didn't realize Baba Ram Dass had 6.
Yeah, I believe he does it in a really ethereal way.
Okay.
But he wasn't the father. It was his guru that was the father. So the guru apparently had sex. So we went to, I went to Kaiser in 1990, and it was just wonderful because they paid the malpractice. I went to work. When I came home, and I just loved it. And during that time, gosh, we were delivering a lot of babies. The first year I worked there, I delivered 505. So I counted them up. I quit counting after that, but it was busy. And then I retired when I was 63. During that time, Rick and Laura took me to Paris and, not Paris, what was it, England and Scotland. That was fun. I loved that. I had a hysterectomy.
No, wait a minute. Did Rick and Laura have anything to do with that?
No, they didn't actually.
Okay, good.
They took me right after I had it, so I could recoup on my trip. And, you know, just had a really good time there. I enjoyed it a lot. Some good friends worked there with me, and I enjoyed all the doctors, and I retired at 63. And then Hagin and I went traveling a number of places. I went to San Miguel de Allende by myself and studied art for 5 weeks. Went to Mexico, to Italy and studied art for 5 weeks. And, you know, we went to Paris and different places like that. And then when, let's see, to get into the 2000s, the kids were grown up and leaving, and we really had a lot of time. We could go out and dance and have a really good time. And then Hagin decided that he was not feeling well in, what was that, 2004, and he didn't look very good. So we took him to the doctors right when Darcy was going to graduate. And he seemed to have this disease called myelodysplastic syndrome. And they said it'd give him about 2 years to live with a lot of blood transfusions. He only made it 2 months. But all the family got together to say goodbye, and that was good. And that was in 2004. So after that, in 2005, I moved to Portland to be close to Darcy and Brendan, and sold the house to Matthew. And I'm still in Portland, and I'm mostly doing art. Because after I retired, I went back to school and studied art again. And I paint about women and women's issues, and that's about it. And now I'm sitting here on an island. It's really fun.
And it is an island, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for those out in the audience there, if you want to see Carole's artwork, it's at www.carole with an E, Hagin.com.
That's it.
Tune in next week for another fun-filled adventure.
All right.